Hi, I'm George Page for Nature. Around 50,000 years ago, violent earthquakes in that part of southern Africa we now call Botswana had a dramatic impact on the Okavango River there. It changed the entire course. Instead of flowing east and emptying into the Indian Ocean, the seismic activity rerouted the great river to the south, causing it to flow into the vast Kalahari, creating a delta in the middle of a desert. The Okavango Delta covers an area half the size of Switzerland and is one of the natural wonders of the world. It's a constantly shifting place. Each year, new streams are born and old ones die. But the attraction to wildlife is constant, a supply of water in an otherwise parched land. A mantle of sand cloaking the heart of southern Africa, the Kalahari challenges life to defy its sun and wind-dried expanse. That challenge has been met by the unique animals of this continent. They evolved with the changing landscape. Nomadic herds cross and recross a formidable arena. In its midst, they know they'll find a living jewel. Months pass without rain in this part of Botswana. Around this inland delta of the Okavango River, the Kalahari is now parched. It's winter, the driest and coldest season. But these shallow lagoons are well flooded with last summer's rains. Hippopotamuses laze in the sun in this, the largest oasis in Africa. Annoyed by the oxpeckers scavenging on its skin, this hippo looks forward to a bath. Having parasites picked off is a service, but when the beaks peck at minor wounds, it's time to take action. Some oxpeckers need an even heavier hint that the hippo has had enough. These transient waters are also the home of the red lechwees. They and the hippos are permanent residents, following the pattern of the rise and fall of the flood. They need the fresh water to survive, and this delta is ever-changing. Where the Okavango River enters Botswana, it's channeled between two faults. Only beyond the confines of what's called the Panhandle can it meander over the flat Kalahari. Here it flows more slowly and fans out to form the fingers of this strange inland delta. From the north, floods from summer rains enter the Panhandle. The flood slows as it reaches the delta and begins to swell the permanent channels and lagoons. But it will take 6 months to reach the far fingers of the delta, and regenerate the remarkable grasslands in the south. By then, in the Panhandle, the river is running low again. Here, the Okavango is still wide and swift, but it's showing its banks of Kalahari sand as the flood recedes. In the sunlight, they flash a welcome to African skimmers coming to breed on these temporary shores. Before the next flood arrives, they must dig a shallow nest and then raise their family. But sandbanks also attract others. The crocodile merely hopes to warm itself on the sand, but there are many crocodiles and many skimmers. This particular real estate is highly desirable, though rather small, and there's keen competition between would-be nest makers. Some set foot on their future investment even before the water drops and the sand becomes available land. Islands in the river tempt hippos out of the water with the lure of fresh grass and leaves. They graze at night to protect their delicate skin from the sun. Male hippos are territorial and spray dung to mark their land-based breeding territories. This makes them important contributors to the nutrient enrichment of the floodplains. A Pell's fishing owl, absorbed by the movements in the murky waters. The slippery catfish is grasped by long, curved claws and held by tiny spines on the underside of the owl's feet. Discarded bones litter the ground below the tree, and the number of catfish skeletons grows as the river level falls. Skimmers earn their name from their spectacular fishing technique. In these main channels, huge numbers of fish are congregating as water recedes from the drying floodplains. Herons, egrets, cormorants, and others are drawn to this commotion. The papyrus stems twitch as hunting packs of catfish slap them with their bodies to flush out their own prey, which hides in between. The catfish have poor eyesight, but use their sensitive barbels, which look like whiskers, to detect the smaller fish attempting to escape this frenzied catfish run. Fish leap for their lives. But often they jump from the jaws of one death to the beak of another. Tigerfish terrorize the open channels. They snap up the easy prey scattered by the catfish run. Related to piranhas, they're fearsomely toothed, powerful predators. The skimmers now have young to feed, a task which can be hampered by the very equipment that makes them so superb at fishing. The enormous bill awkwardly presents an overlarge morsel to the chick. Too much. The occasional uneaten fish left around the nest has caught the attention of a common sandpiper. It's learned that there's often an easy meal here, and a large one, compared to its usual diet of small insects. And it's quite fussy about cleaning this second-hand food. Suddenly, there's great agitation among the skimmers. young fish eagle drops in, but finds no welcome here. It hopes to find a quick snack of an unguarded chick. Skimmers, however, are determined to defend their breeding ground. The air raid is over, and the eagle chased off to find a meal somewhere else. Papyrus, the paper reed, is the largest and fastest growing reed in the world. Its floating mats proliferate with a luxuriance surprising in waters so poor in nourishment. The shy sitatunga is the only large animal to find a home in these reeds. It can survive on the poor feed that papyrus affords, and its unusually long, splayed hooves allow it to lope across the floating reed mats without sinking through. Papyrus can only thrive with the help of bacteria and algae. The matted stems, which form the edge of a channel, have fine roots which are well aerated. These provide a daytime hideout for the spiny eel. Many other small fish can slip between the roots and stems that bar the passage of marauding tigers. The open water is dangerous for most, but hiding here by day are catfish known as squeakers because they squeak when alarmed. Only the reed cormorant finds them a tasty morsel, but it had to learn how to handle them. Hiding under logs and tangles of roots, the squeakers are relatively easy to catch. The trick the cormorant knows is how to swallow the fish without becoming impaled on the barbed spines on 3 of the squeaker's fins. They're so strong they can jam in the throat of a bird or even a crocodile. First, the cormorant has to kill the fish. The 3 rigid fins will have to be folded down before it's swallowed. Even now, the spines are still firmly locked, and they're too strong for the bird to break. The locking mechanism must be disengaged. Moving south, the Okavango slows and spreads out over the Kalahari. In places, it fills shallow basins with huge lagoons. A carpenter bee bores into the hollow shaft of a Phragmites reed, leaving an exactly bee-sized entrance to the nest. It's a sturdy home. She's off to collect the pollen and nectar she'll need to feed her larvae. The water lily bathes her in pollen while she sips the nectar. It's a tiny floating oasis of food. When back at the nest, she'll clean off the pollen and, with the nectar, shape it into balls for the larvae to eat. Detecting the sweet store within, brown ants try to take advantage of the bee's industry. A fallen reed is a convenient bridge for the invaders. There seems no way the nest can be defended. But with great resourcefulness, the bee itself becomes a barricade. Its tough abdomen makes this an impregnable fortress. Even a helper bee is locked out until the ants have gone. The ants have a fierce bite. The flow of water is scarcely perceptible as it filters through the reed beds. Here it's clear, and in the watery sunlight, strange plants flourish. Bladderwort, named after the tiny bladders that festoon its fine branches. It's a plant that catches insects, such as mosquito larvae. Each bladder is a trap. Triggered by touch, a door opens, and water rushes in, sucking a mosquito larva along with it. It will be digested by the plant, which needs this nitrogen-rich meal in waters where food is scarce. As bright as the lilies and camouflaged among them, pairs of pygmy geese enjoy eating the fruits which are just under the surface. The water is clear, so the tiny goose can easily see them. This male hasn't picked the fruit to eat, but as a gift of courtship. He'll present it to his mate. Now he'll find one for himself. As he feeds, some seeds are scattered, but they'll not fall far. Robber fish are always ready for such handouts. There are no tiger fish in these shallow waters, and in relative safety, a male dwarf mouth brooder is displaying to females that stray into his home ground. The warmer waters of summer have brightened his courting colors. Attracted by his display, she joins the dance. His shimmering colors will stimulate her to lay a batch of eggs. Immediately, he showers them with sperm, and shortly after, she does something quite extraordinary. She takes all the eggs into her mouth before they can be eaten by another fish. She doesn't swallow them, but holds them while she's again attracted by patterns on the male's anal fin. She nibbles at his vent and takes sperm directly into her mouth, improving the chances of the eggs being fertilized. The eggs will be kept in her mouth for safety, as will the young fish that hatch from them. The male has no further part to play in caring for his offspring and is already courting other female mouth brooders. Quite the reverse is true of the male lily trotter or African jacana. It is he who minds the eggs, tucking them gently under his wings with fatherly concern and lifting them clear of the wet, floating nest. The female jacana, intent on producing more eggs, is mating with another male. By the end of the season, several males in separate nests will be raising her scattered offspring in single-parent families. Once the eggs start hatching, the male is faced with a problem of safety. The brilliant white insides of the eggshells are not camouflaged like the mottled outsides and could catch the eye of a fish eagle. Disposing of this bright refuse will cheat the eyes in the sky. And there are hungry eyes below the lily pads as well. Watching the dwarf mouth brooders is a striped swamp snake. A male mouth brooder has been caught, and the slender snake must dislocate its own jaws in order to accommodate this bulky, living meal. The female dwarf mouth brooder is well camouflaged. Should she be eaten, an entire brood would be lost. She hasn't fed for almost 2 weeks and has had no reason to waste energy in movement. Her family is now fully formed and is quite a mouthful. She must let them out to feed for themselves because the egg yolks that sustain their early growth are used up. At the slightest threat, even from a fish of the same kind, she summons all 40 or so to the safety of her mouth, where they'll remain until the danger is past. The lily pads are risky places to be young. With predators above and below, the hatching jacanas need to be ready to walk as soon as they're out of their eggs. Instinctively, they know safety lies under father's wings, but inexperience occasionally leads to overshooting the mark. Its down will dry quickly in the sun, no harm is done, and a lesson is learned. The jacana wants to feed, but the chicks are too vulnerable to be left alone, so they must be taken along. Responding to his calls and seeing him crouched with wings open, they climb aboard. Amazingly, he can hold them quite securely, and only the forest of dangling feet gives away his hidden cargo. The long toes of the adult allow its weight to be spread on the lily pads. Now they must cope with the additional burden. This is why it's called a lily trotter. Quite soon, the young jacanas are able to trot the lily pads and feed for themselves, chasing suitably tiny insects. But the male keeps careful watch. There are still eagles above and the African pike below. The delta is molded both by the Okavango's water and the life it sustains. These ancient islands were founded by termites, which built mounds of soil that were soon colonized by vegetation. Their sturdy architecture and the ready supply of water can support huge trees like phoenix palms and sycamore figs. The macuchum, or African ebony, is the largest. A Pell's fishing owl has her family lodged in its branches. While the male goes fishing, she and her chick nap in the morning sun. The sycamore fig is a great benefactor of the swamps. The figs ripen often during the year. Troops of chacma baboons move from island to island to gather them greedily as soon as they appear. Birds, such as the green pigeon, have the greatest freedom of movement around the swamps. The pigeons eat only fruit and scatter the seeds as they fly from island to island. As the oppressively hot summer progresses, the skies periodically threaten rain and finally fulfill their life-giving promise. The dry season is finally over. The first rains trigger termites into nuptial flight. These are the winged form of fungus-growing termites whose chambered castles still build and fortify the islands. Reed frogs are inspired by the rains to call for mates. These long reed frogs climb high to serenade and contest violently with rivals for the best songposts. Fruits burgeon on the fig trees, and fruit bats soon find the clusters. They have excellent sight, but it's their keen sense of smell that leads to the ripest. And they've perfected a special technique for plucking the fruit. The acrobatics continue on the twig. One foot hangs on, the other handles the meal. Some 20 figs a night will be vigorously chewed for their pulp and juice. Frequently, the bat must reverse position as the calls of nature are stimulated by its appetite for figs. Now satiated, it remains watchful for its safety. An agile climber, the rusty-spotted genet might take a fruit bat, but usually has other prey in mind. Abundant acacia rats make for easier hunting on the ground. The mate of the unfortunate acacia rat has her family high in the hollow of a matsauri tree. Life goes on as she gathers fresh leaves to thicken the lining of the nest where she's suckling her young. On the islands, day and night, the hunters follow their noses, and the prey is ever watchful. In each encounter, only one is successful. A python climbs stealthily, but forewarned, the rat can move quickly, and instinct must tell the young ones to hang on. The scent of rat is stronger. The nest is closer. But this time, the python is too late. The Okavango meanders gently past thousands of these islands, and farther south, it runs shallow over the Kalahari sands. Now the seasonal floodplains ripple with grasses, and the approaching winter is drying this new face of the delta. Red lechwees roam the borders of the narrow channels. They graze on the young grasses growing in the shallow water. Their splayed hooves allow them to run more easily through water than on dry land. With African hunting dogs just a short sprint away, the lechwees rely on their mobility through water to escape. As the channels dry out, the lechwees become more vulnerable to these now rare plains hunters. At the height of the dry season, these shallows will have vanished into the sand. But then comes that paradox of the desert. For 6 months, the annual rains have crept from the northern highlands through the delta. Now, long after the rains have ceased, this pulse of life-regenerating water surges into these thirsty grasslands. Nourished by the fresh grass, the lechwees become ready to breed. There's a new vigor in the fighting between males over territory. They strive now to gain control of an area and the exclusive right to mate with the females within it. But the victor does not always win the honor, and while the rivals fight, this male grasps an opportunity. Among the flooded grasses, there suddenly appear mysterious mounds of foam. The bubbles have been blown by adult African pikes, and eggs laid by the female have floated up into this foam. They've hatched in this well-aerated water and are hidden by the bright umbrella from searching eyes above. Until the egg yolk is used up, they remain suspended by a sticky substance on their heads. The watchful parents replenish the foam, and after several more days, platoons of young pike are ready to be on their own. Many survive to become the principal hunting fish in the seasonal floodplains. But in these clear waters, even a pike needs to hide. The fish eagle has a family to feed at this time of the flood. As the rising waters spill out over the floodplains, the fish eagle rules over a vast, shallow feeding ground. Many fish move into the shallows to breed. Of the 80 or so kinds potentially on the menu, the eagle usually seizes the larger ones. There may have been 3 eaglets to begin with, but sometimes the first to hatch gets a head start, and only the largest survives. It's hard to believe that such an oasis can exist in the midst of the arid Kalahari. This desert water flourishes only by virtue of the timely infusion of the flood. Egyptian geese are drawn to this wetland by the new grasses. The fights for territory and breeding rights are part of the great struggle for survival that takes place around these waters. Every season sees a different part of the drama. The flood brings abundant food and a time of rebirth. Mayflies live 2 years as nymphs in these waters, but within 2 days they'll mate, lay eggs, and die. The delta nurtures a complex community of life in the midst of the desert. People have shared this resource for 100,000 years, keeping time with the seasons and the rise and fall of the waters. And as Botswana faces the future, the Okavango will remain its brightest jewel, shining in the Kalahari. Join us next time as we look at the impact of man on the Great Kalahari Desert and the Okavango Delta. I'm George Page for Nature.
Nancy Frank of Outdoor Wisconsin goes sea kayaking on Squaw Bay of Lake Superior, next at 9 on Channel 10.
Karen Ross has written a companion book to this program, Okavango, Jewel of the Kalahari. It is available in bookstores and libraries.